Hare Krishna. I'm about to begin part 2 of the time frame between 1995 and 1999. Let me just offer some prayers first. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Samaniti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Vicharne Nirvise Sasanivari Paskachate Satarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Hare Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Anshakapaturubhyascha kripasinavyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So my obeisances to all you devotees who may listen to this. I hope there's something useful in it. I'm starting to wonder and I'm starting to feel like I'd like to move on to something more directly inspirational. Today's the appearance day of Srivas Thakur. I would love to do a series on him and Antardweep Dham. So many classes could be done on that, which I would like to do, but somehow I feel that I should finish this to the best of my ability. I don't know if it's helpful or useful for anyone, but somehow I feel I should finish what I started. So I will continue on to, this is part 2 of that time between 95 and 1999. I may not get all the dates and years quite right, but at least, around the right time. I'm trying to do it, but this is not the definitive history. So at the end of part 1, and I recommend if you haven't listened to that you listen to part 1, because I explained there that during these years, issues surrounding the Gaudiya Math and specifically Sripad Narayan Maharaj arose. And in order to give some context to that discussion, in the last talk, I first gave some background information on the history of Srila Prabhupada's and iskcon's relationship with the Gaudiya Math. So I will continue on here with that same discussion. So it is not at all my intention to give the whole history of the issues that arose or to judge it or to say what was right or wrong. I'm just not in a position to do that. And it's not really the intention of these talks. I'm just trying to show some of the things that were going on at different times in iskcon's evolution and how it impacted or changed our society, our movement, and how it affected me personally. So through the 90s, Narayan Maharaj had become a popular Gaudiya Math sannyasi. He is the disciple of Sriman Bhakti Pragya Kesava Maharaj, who is the sannyas guru of Srila Prabhupada. And a number of iskcon devotees had been regularly going to visit him. I think I mentioned that in a previous talk. So some senior devotees seem to have become quite attached to his association, and there was some growing concern about why these very respected leaders were doing this and where this was headed, where was this going. So this, eventually became known as the Rasika Bhakti controversy. because it seemed, Narayan Maharaj seemed to emphasize higher topics in his preaching. Of course, there's differing opinions about everything. I can only present what I was aware of and the way I experienced it. So personally, I was curious at this time. I was just curious. Up to this point, we'd had a good relationship with Narayan Maharaj, and I was, just personally wondering, why are they going there, and, what are they thinking? So I did ask one of those senior people who were going there, who I was quite friendly with, why did they start going to see Narayan Maharaj? What was their intentions? And he explained that many devotees were now reading the Goswami's books, which were increasingly becoming available to devotees, which contained topics of Raganuga Bhakti. And so some of the leaders, gurus, felt that they should be able to understand and explain higher topics so that devotees don't feel the need to go outside iskcon to understand them. Kind of ironic. So it was felt that Narayan Maharaj could help them, in this regard. Now, that's not to say that everyone who was going to see him, that was their reasoning. I'm just presenting this. Others may have other intentions, but this was one reason given. And another factor that was mentioned was that it's just not easy for leaders and new gurus to be without Srila Prabhupada's association. Who was the person that they trusted they could go to for answering their questions and for getting guidance? A big weight of responsibility had fallen on their shoulders, and they didn't have any senior Vaishnavas to turn to for help and inspiration. So these were some points. I'm sure there are many other points. But, I don't know, personally, regarding the need to learn the higher topics, I just didn't see an urgent need. Anyone who has read Srila Prabhupada's books, especially Chaitanya Charitamrita, this is very high and intimate topics discussed. Srila Prabhupada actually said that my books are like a pharmacy. They contain medicine for every level of devotee, from the most neophyte to the most advanced. This isn't an inconceivable achievement. Such a teacher, imagine someone who can masterfully play a grand piano from the top to the bottom. That is what Prabhupada was doing in his books. It's quite remarkable. And Chaitanya Charitamrita, it contains the deepest transcendental mysteries regarding separation and very high topics, and such a treasure. And you just imagine that, at the time of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he struggled to even find a copy of Chaitanya Charitamrita. And now, just a few days ago here in Mayapur, they began a marathon of selling Chaitanya Charitamrita sets, 5,000 in a matter of a few days. Just imagine that. Just imagine what our previous acharyas, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, how they would see this. This is miraculous. These very deep topics opened up to the whole world by the grace of Srila Prabhupada. So personally, I doubted that there were many devotees who had really assimilated all of this information. Really? So the idea that there was a desperate need for greater information, well, it just seemed bizarre to me. I didn't really agree with that, but anyway, that's just my feeling. But we know that Srila Prabhupada told us that he had given us everything we need to go back to Godhead in his books. In one letter, he said, I'll read that. In my books, the philosophy of Krishna consciousness is explained fully. So if there's anything which you do not understand, then you simply have to read again and again. So for myself, I just was painfully aware that I, had and still have a very long way to go to even truly realize and live by the basic principles given in Bhagavad Gita. What to speak of higher topics. Just to quote some of a few basic verses in Bhagavad Gita. Chapter 2, verse 56, I will read them. One who is not disturbed in mind, even amidst the threefold miseries, or elated when there's happiness, who is free from attachment, fear, and anger, he's called a sage of steady mind. And the next verse, in the material world, one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor despising it, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. And chapter 12, verses 13 and 14, one who is not envious, but is a kind friend to all living entities, who does not think himself a proprietor and is free from false ego, who is equal in both happiness and distress, who is tolerant, always self-satisfied, self-controlled, and engaged in devotional service with determination, his mind and intelligence fixed on me. Such a devotee of mine is very dear to me. And a few verses later, he by whom no one is put into difficulty and who is not disturbed by anyone, who is equipoised in happiness and distress, fear and anxiety, he's very, very dear to me. Phew. When I read that, such a long way to go. And judging by how I sometimes saw devotees treating each other, it seemed to me it wasn't that I wasn't the only one who had, a ways to go. Maybe I'm just projecting my own low level of consciousness, but there just didn't seem to be, to me, a crying need. It seemed more a crying need for putting Bhagavad Gita into practice rather than a need for understanding higher topics. But that is the way I saw it. And especially because we were aware of Srila Prabhupada and also Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's warnings to be cautious of trying to jump too high, too quickly. We'd gone through this type of thing previously, and Srila Prabhupada had given us clear warnings, and we all knew well, we know that the desire to rise to the highest place, it's a common human tendency. We want to be the best. We want to know more than the other person. We want to have more. We want to strive to stand out, and this eager, driven tendency, it can definitely enter into the spiritual field. So it's something to be cautious about, to always question and examine our motivations. Plus, there was also the warning from Srila Prabhupada to be cautious about associating with his godbrothers and with the Gaudiya Math. So there did seem to be some good reasons for being somewhat skeptical about what was going on. And indeed, the GBC was very concerned. I mean, why were they concerned? I mean, these are many respectable, intelligent devotees felt that they were getting inspiration and good guidance from him. And we know that Narayan Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada had an affectionate relationship. So, what was the big concern? What were the issues that seemed so critical? And of course, again, I'm not in a position to explain it all, but for people, newer people that were not there, people on into the future, they would probably like to know some of the issues that arose, and just try to say a few things in a nutshell. So, of course, what leaders do, the general devotees will follow. So, how will that play out if, many devotees start, going other places for guidance and help? How will that affect iskcon? And another concern was that it seemed that Narayan Maharaj encouraged iskcon devotees that they should not remain neophyte, just clinging simply to rules and regulations, but they should follow the path of spontaneous devotion. And there is certainly nothing wrong with that. It's not philosophically incorrect. Certainly, Srila Rupa Goswami encourages all sadhakas to move to the spontaneous platform as quickly as possible. However, it did seem that that was being implied that Srila Prabhupada had only given us the ABCs, and that there were higher teachings that he could have given his disciples if we had been more advanced. But now, some devotees were ready for the more advanced stage of Krishna consciousness, which he could give to them. Narayan Maharaj could give to them. So, I think naturally this mood was somewhat worrisome. We're all aware that Srila Prabhupada warned us to be cautious of, prematurely jumping. That is well documented. And although it is certainly Narayan Maharaj's prerogative to preach and emphasize whatever he wants, but it was indeed a somewhat different mood, different emphasis, and this is what Srila Prabhupada warned us about. He said that if they say one thing different, then it would cause confusion. And so it did. And another concern was there that some who considered, there were some, not saying all, but there were some who considered that Narayan Maharaj, they considered him to be the natural successor for iskcon, that he should be the next acharya. not necessarily from Narayan Maharaj himself, but some of his followers had spoken like that, and it's not hard to see how this would naturally cause alarm. We all know very well Srila Prabhupada's instructions about naming an acharya and the problems that arose in the Gaudiya Math, so this was disturbing. And the reason why some had come to this conclusion was because in his final days, Srila Prabhupada spoke with various godbrothers, and when Narayan Maharaj came to see him, he asked that he help us after he leaves. Now, from this, some devotees felt that Srila Prabhupada had entrusted Narayan Maharaj with a unique, ongoing role in the spiritual leadership of iskcon. Now, I think I can say with confidence that this was certainly a misunderstanding of that conversation, because I was there. I think it's recorded, and it's a Bengali conversation, but I was personally there at that time when this discussion was going on. I happened to be going past Srila Prabhupada's house, and there was a concern, oh, there are godbrothers here and we don't have any prasadam to offer them. So I don't remember, somebody called me and said, could you quickly go in the back and make something? So I rushed through Prabhupada's room to the back. Out in the back is his kitchen. And fortunately soon Bhakti Caru Maharaja came to the rescue to rustle up something quickly that we could give them. And he explained that this conversation had gone on, and that Srila Prabhupada had asked that Narayan Maharaj help us when he departs this world, with what needs to be done. There's much that has to be done at that time. The samadhi ceremony and all involved with that, to honor Srila Prabhupada and to do the right thing. We would need help. And certainly we did need help. And that is exactly what he was asked to do. And that is exactly what he did do very wonderfully. And, I felt at the time very, very grateful for that. But thinking that Srila Prabhupada had somehow named him, that just is inaccurate. And another concern that the GBC had and devotees had was the apparent and sometimes subtle minimization of Srila Prabhupada. Again, not necessarily at all from Narayan Maharaj himself, but there were certainly some Gaudiya Math members who really did not yet recognize Srila Prabhupada's unique contribution and empowerment, and who tended to undervalue his position, which still goes on to some extent, seeing him just as one among many of the Gaudiya Math gurus. And another concern was the attempts made by followers of Narayan Maharaj to, it seemed, to just solely attract iskcon devotees, rather than, going out, making new devotees, preaching. Showing up at iskcon events, and again, I'm not saying this was something that was devised by Narayan Maharaj himself, but some of his people were doing this, showing up at iskcon events and distributing their literatures and inviting devotees to come to meet him. And I saw this myself. I was in the restaurant in Mayapur one afternoon, And there were a couple of Narayan Maharaj followers who were former iskcon men. They were sitting behind us and they were talking in French, but they didn't know the person I was sitting with spoke French. So she was telling me what they were saying, and they were talking about going fishing, going out around the campus and fishing for, disgruntled iskcon devotees they could bring back to their camp. So, this was going on. And so there were certainly things to worry about for the institution, of iskcon. And so finally, I believe it was the GBC meetings in '96, they mandated some severe restrictions on the leaders and all the devotees, stating that they could no longer associate with Narayan Maharaj. I don't know the exact wording of it, but maybe they said all Gaudiya Math, I don't know. But suffice to say that it was a strong and forceful move to stop this ongoing relationship. Of course, as with everything, there are various opinions on whether it was the right thing to do or not. Personally, I did feel it was the responsibility of the GBC to clear up or make some, deal with issues that were arising institutionally. But how we deal with each other personally, well, that's a different thing. Now, unfortunately, this ban, as far as I understand, this ban, and what I saw personally, many things, was instituted and executed quite badly. That is my understanding. Apparently, although it wasn't supposed to be so, no one went to inform Narayan Maharaj to respectfully explain why this decision was made. And this was very, very bad. So he would hear this through the grapevine. It's very insulting. Suddenly, all these people that he had developed a relationship with, they stopped coming to see him. As far as I know, and what I was informed by one of those leaders, that somehow it just didn't happen. No one of them went to speak to him personally. Well, it's just not the right way to deal with a senior Vaishnava, not at all proper Vaishnava etiquette. It wasn't supposed to happen that way, but somehow that seems to be what transpired. So this drove a deeper wedge between his followers and iskcon. And of course, Narayan Maharaj followers were angry, and they felt GBC had made grave offenses to Narayan Maharaj. And so thus they just became more aggressive in their proselytizing efforts and trying to take devotees away from iskcon to him, and also behaving quite badly. And adding more fuel to the fire was that unfortunately in various parts of the world, iskcon leaders instituted this ban in a quite insensitive way and managed to push many devotees out of the iskcon door. And it was quite shocking for many devotees that suddenly, they had been in good standing for years, and now they're persona non grata, is that how you say it? Unwanted, because they had had some association with Narayan Maharaj or his followers. So the results of all of this was a thunderstorm of accusations on both sides. Cursing and counter-cursing is like a daksha yagya. And Narayan Maharaj started traveling more widely, initiating very easily, and gathering quite a large following, primarily among former iskcon members. And of course the GBC, they did have to take a stance, and that's not an easy thing to do. I think their intentions were correct, and I think they did the right thing, but perhaps in the wrong way. Or it could have been better. It could have been done in a more sensitive, mature, and respectful way, and it might not have gotten so ugly. And I just pray that in the future we can imbibe these qualities more deeply, being more mature, more respectful, so that problems in the future, there's always going to be problems that are going to arise, that we can handle them better. From the sidelines, just watching it all, I just felt very sad to see all this unpleasantness, and disappointing behavior all around. A lot of neophyte consciousness. It's not like, it was the good guys and the bad guys, Devotees on both sides of these arguments made offenses and were behaving not well. Of course, not everyone, but some were. So that was happening during this time, and there was another contentious issue around the same time regarding the fall of the jivas. So 95, 96, there were two devotees, Satyanarayan Prabhu, now Satyanarayan Babaji, who runs the Jiva Institute, and Kundali Prabhu. They wrote a book called In Vaikuntha, Not Even the Leaves Fall. Now, wherein they made a very strong case that we did not fall from the spiritual world. And it was a scholarly and well-researched book, and they'd studied various commentaries of different acharyas, and this is their conclusion. Now, this topic has been debated from time immemorial, so it's not surprising that there's varying views about it. The influence of new translations of important Vaishnava texts and commentaries, which appeared to differ from Prabhupada, that added to the confusion, and controversy arose. So this question, it's been debated over the years in ISKCON, but now these devotees were making a firm statement about it, which seemed to differ from what Srila Prabhupada had told us. So it was necessary for the GBC to respond to the issue. One might say, why was it important for them to respond? I'd say for two main reasons. One was that raising such issues after Prabhupada's departure, it brought up fundamental questions about the authority of Prabhupada's teachings. And another was that the authors had stated in their book that Prabhupada's statements about the fall of the soul, saying that we fell from the spiritual world, that this was merely a preaching strategy that he adopted just to suit this particular time and circumstance. But he did not, it didn't really represent his actual conviction. That, I immediately say, sounds completely crazy. I mean, Srila Prabhupada, the most direct and straightforward and fearless preacher, was just using some tactic? No way. That is my firm conviction. No way. That is not how Srila Prabhupada was. So the concern was obvious and it was serious. Once one aspect of Prabhupada's teaching is labeled as a mere preaching ploy, then there's nothing to ensure that whatever else he taught was not equally a deception. So, this book, it kind of threatened to undermine the very philosophical foundation of iskcon. So, the GBC at their annual meetings, they took maybe 95 or 96, and they took steps they commissioned a book to be written, which was called Our Original Position, establishing that Srila Prabhupada's instructions and personal example are to be the first and primary source for iskcon devotees. And in their conclusion, they said that the members of iskcon who live perpetually at the feet of Srila Prabhupada, they may speculate how Srila Prabhupada's statements are true, but they may not challenge his statements or claim that they are false. So this is precisely what it means to accept Srila Prabhupada as the founder Acharya. So the Leaves book was banned, and the author's participation within iskcon limited. And it's not so surprising that both of them eventually left iskcon. But even at that time, I couldn't help but wonder, if it had to become so contentious, did we really need to ban the book? I mean, couldn't devotees know different sides of the story? Couldn't they choose for themselves, to respect the GBC position or not, I know we tend to like things to be black and white, but usually it's not. There's usually shades. But anyway, it was yet another sad and unpleasant experience. And personally, I just could not understand, and still don't, how devotees could go to war over various viewpoints on things to the point of spoiling their relationship with the movement and God brothers just to establish a point. I just don't understand the need to know with all certainty how or where we fell from. Am I going to love Krishna more if I know that? Will I chant better? Why do we need to fight about things that Srila Prabhupada said are beyond our comprehension? Now, Srila Prabhupada did say various things about this topic, but the one that seemed the most important and resonated with me the most is when he said, "What does it matter? You are fallen. That is certain." And most of us will not understand this until we are significantly more advanced. And although these issues didn't impact, on my own life, personally, it made me sad and disappointed to see nice devotees get caught up in issues to the extent that they fight about it and become angry about it and wind up offending each other. It is heartbreaking to see devotees damage their spiritual life over this sort of thing. And we've seen it many times. So this kind of arguing is, it's kind of what turned me off the church when I was a kid, seeing religious people, at each other's necks over, philosophical technicalities, So I simply pray that we all try our best to steer clear of this kind of mentality. And sometimes I felt it was actually favorable to be a woman, with little position or power within the institution. I think we tend to be less invested in the arguing propensity and the need to be right. When the need to establish a particular viewpoint on some social or political, institutional or philosophical issue becomes so strong that we forget that the practice of Krishna consciousness it's based on Trinadapi Sunichena. I mean, when we see ourselves doing these things, then, we can know we're going astray. How much can we really know? How much do we really know? Our understanding, it evolves over time. We can't understand things simply by poring over Shastra, making an argument. It just doesn't work that way. Things will eventually be understood by realization, which requires patience and sincerity and serious sadhana. And more than anything, it requires mercy. It's revelation, can't be forced. But one thing that, is clear, that remaining neophytes is very dangerous, both personally and institutionally. But fortunately, despite the challenges and changes during this time period, the dispersing of devotees and increasing diversity, still there were always so many very dedicated, committed devotees going full steam ahead to keep the mission going and distributing books and making new devotees. And there was a lot of expansion in the 90s, despite it all, because there are always many suffering souls crying out for help. And it is our foremost duty as devotees to answer that cry, to not get so caught up in internal issues that we forget our mission and the mood of Sriman Mahaprabhu. Fortunately, there's always been, many sincere devotees that, work hard, especially the Sankirtan devotees, to keep that focus, often without recognition. And we tend to hear a lot about the problems that occurred and quite a bit less about the heroic dedication of many devotees who remained fixed in their service and their duties, unwavering, because of their love for Srila Prabhupada and all that he gave us, regardless of what's going on around us. We always have the personal choice to become Krishna conscious or not. So back to our life in Mayapur. This is, I guess, geez, a lot going on in 96. It was the centennial year of Srila Prabhupada's birth, so there had been many global programs and activities were planned to glorify Srila Prabhupada throughout the whole year, all over the world, with the intention of making sure that Prabhupada's position as a founder acharya was widely understood and appreciated. And now that we're, becoming more congregation-centered, there was a focus on expanding congregation globally and new strategies for developing Namahata. And in Mayapur, the Pushpa Samadhi finally opened. I mean, it took a long time, 20 years, to build, both the Samadhis took a very long time. Younger devotees, you need to understand, what it takes to do these kind of big projects. It requires so much dedication and determination amid so many challenges, really not easy. And it's very glorious when they're completed, But meanwhile, our family, things were good. My daughter, Rasarani, had gone into the preschool in Mayapur. And it was run by a wonderful Swiss devotee, Radhapriya. And you just simply could not ask for a nicer environment. Kids loved it. And when the kids are happy, so are the parents. So we were very happy to be there. And things were going well. My husband was mostly writing and trying to work on book sales, some traveling and preaching about Srila Prabhupada, which was extremely important. There was a need for more internal preaching, inspiring devotees, and just talking about Prabhupada. And that is what my husband does best, and what devotees really do love to hear. So that was going well. And for myself, I had finished the book about Narottam Das Thakur, and I had been trying for quite a long time different artists to try to put artwork into the book. And it was difficult because I had a vision. I didn't want it to be cartoonish. I wanted it to be realistic. It's very hard to get something from your head into 3D reality. And after a while, I just decided I just didn't want it. I wanted people to envision the pastimes in their own head. And so I just decided not to do it, and eventually I even just decided not to print the book at all. I had been writing the book, it was just a personal interest, something that inspired me. But in the meantime, during the years I was working on it, just as a side project, many English translations had come out of Narottam Vilas, Prem Vilas. So a lot of the pastimes were now becoming available. And so I just didn't see a strong need. And so I didn't move forward with that at that time. It just, kept it in my computer, and on appearance and disappearance days, I would bring it out. And so that was that. And around this time, this is when, we started using the internet. I mean, this is a few years earlier. I remember when we were in San Diego, one day Jayadurti Maharaj had come in and he'd announced that, there's this new thing, this amazing new resource, the internet. And it sounded, wow, where's that going to go? What's it going to be like? So now in Mayapur, we're starting to utilize it regularly. And this is a huge change in people's lives, huge, mega. Everything changes from this point forward, And I could hear my husband trying to log on, in the evening over and over and over, trying to connect. Sometimes you just have to do it again and again and again. It was pretty slow. But, we were getting attached to that. And I remember the first time my husband sent an email to a neighbor. And I thought, that's ridiculous. Prabhu, how could you send an email to somebody that lives 2 doors away? I thought it just seemed absurd. Why don't you just go see him? He's just there. And just imagine now I send a message to my husband who's in the other room in the same apartment. How this has changed the way we live so much. Whew, really need to look at that. Anyway, I was busy with family and continuing regular trips to Vrindavan for organizing deity outfits. And, around this time there started to be more and more shops opening up in Vrindavan to supply outfits and deity paraphernalia. There used to, in the beginning there was just one with not so much stuff. So that was really growing, and devotees were now starting to come themselves from various temples to design their own outfits. So my output was becoming a little bit less, but still it was quite a lot to keep up with. And then there's another event. God, there's just so much happened in these years. It's kind of shocking how many things were going on at one time. There was a terrible event that took place, and I'm pretty sure it was in '96. There were revelations about the devastating abuses that went on in some gurukulas. This was revealed. And, everyone was, especially now we have internet, now we find out about all these things, which previously was a very different way of being informed. But everyone was really jolted into confronting iskcon's shortcomings. There were maybe a dozen former Gurukula students who told their histories of being abused as children to maybe, 60 or 70 leaders at their annual North American meeting in Alachua. And I didn't hear the specific descriptions, but we were told that, the vivid details were given of beatings, abandonment, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, that was absolutely heartbreaking. So heartbreaking that even at that meeting, there was grown men and women were just crying. And some of them even, fell to the ground begging forgiveness from the youth for not being aware of the abuse and not doing more to prevent it. It really stunned the world. Really, abuse, well, it wasn't supposed to happen here. Not in the Hare Krishna movement, abuse happens somewhere else, I mean, of course, things had come up prior to this. We had heard about a number of things, but there were rumors, and there were what seemed to be isolated cases and various things. But overall, most devotees believe that gurukulas were doing fairly well in most places. And, we assumed that children were safe, or that the teachers were pretty good. And sadly, this was far from true. And it was so shocking and so disconcerting. And of course, many more things would be revealed over time. Now, personally, the way that affected me, now having a child, just inconceivable. You know, and the only way I could think to respond to this was to just dig in and try to make things better where I was. So I think my husband and I joined, I think it was the first CPT team in Mayapur. Maybe, I'm not sure, maybe that was 97, 98, 90, I'm not sure. But around soon after this. And I came to see, you know, what a very, very difficult service this is. You know, we had to take some training from a devotee professional from New York. It was very eye-opening, really eye-opening. And we had to learn many things about child abuse. It's not one thing. It has many, many manifestations, and uncovering it is often extremely difficult. And we experienced this firsthand. We saw that, you know, when we tried to go back over, I thought, let's help, let's try and clean up, whatever. But these are not easy things to do, believe me. You know, when we would try to find when there had been some complaints, talk to victims, very often they don't want to tell for many good reasons. We also found that many times stories were mixed up, cases confused. I don't know, there were many, don't want to get into things that we found out. You know, once we had heard a horrific story that was reported, and supposedly one person did this terrible thing, and we looked into it, and eventually we found out it was true. It was a true story, and it was a completely different person who had done it than it was a common rumor that this particular person had done this horrible thing. You know, so I'm just saying I won't go into it. Maybe later I'll talk more about it, but at this time, you know, we tried to do something what we could, but it is a hellish job in which you are damned if you do and damned if you don't. You know, there are people who will think that you're really making offenses if you even interview a senior person or someone that people respect. And then there are other devotees who will feel, you know, you're just, you know, whitewashing things, and you're just being too lenient no matter what you do. You know, it's a very difficult task, thankless task, but necessary. Not many people actually want to do it or are actually qualified to do it. There's just so much to be done and to learn about this. But for sure, it just isn't enough to yell into Facebook about it. I mean, up until this point, I had seen the new Mayapur Gurukula fairly up close. I'd taken care of it for one day when Kripamai had to go somewhere. And to me, it appeared to be doing so well. Incredible, beautiful children, and nice devotee teachers. In France, Jyotirmai was super intelligent, super dedicated to Gurukula. Then Kripa Mai followed her, who was also an amazing, loving person that I think many of the kids still love her. I don't know. It appeared to be a wonderful environment. And at the manor, I'd also seen, it seemed like such a nice little school. And again, there were many wonderful, dedicated teachers and such fantastic kids. Jagadatri, she's been, dedicated to preschool for her whole life. Moksha Lakshmi, Guru Charna Padma, many others. So, to me, I'm just saying this, well, why didn't we do things? Why, I didn't see, it wasn't obvious to me that things needed to be done. To me, that was my experience. I had been in Vrindavan a lot, and I had friends who worked in the Gurukula, but it was a pretty closed environment, and understandably, it's very hard to know what is going on in there. I did at some point feel concern from time to time, but what do you do with vague feelings of concern? I often feel concerned about many things, but if it's not my service and I don't have any specifics, very often we didn't really know what is going on, To me, I would watch the Gurukul boys in Vrindavan doing kirtan down to the Yamuna, and it looked like, wow, what a great life. And for some of them it was, and for many of them it wasn't. But this is the greatest sadness and disappointment. It's just too much, to know, that many children suffered so much. It was absolutely shocking and disturbing, continues to be, and we have very big lessons. Very big lessons to learn, certainly cut us down off our high horse that we sometimes get on. Anyway, going past into 1988, I would like to tell a story of a dear friend. I think I mentioned her in one of my first talks. Her name is Vilasini. She's the one that told me you should just, when you chant, you should just meditate on the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani. She told me this in 1970. Somehow, she really got to the essence very quickly. Now, I don't know, we had been, remained in friendship throughout all of the years. She had come to Europe after, she had been in Detroit when I was there, and then later she came to Europe. And, we kept in touch, and I saw her through the years, and I don't remember when we first found out that she had been diagnosed with cancer. But she told me how it come about. She was the Pujari, the head Pujari for Radha Landanishwar, and she was a fantastic Pujari. She was so clean and so precise, and people feared, they knew she wanted everything to be really done well for the deities. She was so good at that. And she had a very unique characteristics. And one of them was that she had this ability, to get people to really open up to her and tell her their deepest, darkest secrets. Now that's something when someone's holding that over you sometimes. And she had an ability that, well, she had a fault that she saw herself, that it was very hard for her to forgive someone that she felt had treated her wrong. She just couldn't forgive. And she could be very heavy about that. But she was also a very philosophically sound person, very knowledgeable, and she was a wonderful devotee, but she struggled with these certain anarthas. And she told me that at some point she went before Radha Landanishwara and she said, I cannot change these bad things about me. If you want it to be gone, then you just have to do it. I've tried in so many ways, and I have been unsuccessful. So she said that shortly after that, she noticed she had a little swelling in her stomach, and she didn't feel so well, and so she went to the doctor, only to find out that she had, I don't know, 3rd or 4th stage stomach cancer. And she felt that while she's sitting there and the doctor's telling her this, she felt like she could see Radhalandanishwara above the doctor's head just saying, well, you asked us to do something. This is what we've done. And so from that point, that's how she took her cancer, that she had some anarthas. And now she saw these cancer cells in her body as a manifestation of those anarthas. And she worked hard to cure herself, not of the disease, but of what they represented. You know, these things like that she couldn't forgive and that she would hold a grudge and that she could really make somebody's life difficult because of it. And so, so this battle was going on. And then I heard she went into remission after some time, and that's the last I heard. But then, suddenly, in July of '98, I heard that she departed. And I was shocked. I mean, it had already happened. I didn't hear anything about it, and it sort of haunted me. She was a very dear friend, and we've been through a lot of things together. And I just wondered and wondered if she felt that she had, you know, conquered those anarthas. And what did she feel? What did she think? And then I heard that how she had departed. She had told her husband that she didn't want him to make a fuss. You know, that if she's leaving her body, that he should just chant to her. Don't call a bunch of devotees, don't do anything, just chant to her. She didn't want to make a fuss. That's what she told her husband. But she went into a coma, and her husband became very mental. And he thought, maybe this is not good. He'd heard some Prabhupada had said, if you're in a coma. And so he couldn't help himself. He called Leela Shakti, who was Vilasini's best friend in London. And she was very upset. She was close to Vilasini, and she rushed into the temple room, I guess to take shelter of Radhalandaneshwara, and class was going on. Jayadvaita Maharaj looked up and he saw her. He must have seen that she looked distressed, and he stopped speaking and he said, Leela Shakti, is there something going on? And she said, well, I think Vilasini is about to leave her body. So Maharaj said, well, I guess it's time for the real life Bhagavatam class. And so all the devotees, many devotees, heard that she's leaving, and they rushed to be with her. Now Vilasini came out of her coma and, was stunned to see so many devotees had come, and she asked to be sat up and given her beads, and for many, many hours they could just see that her lips were, her tongue was moving, chanting the holy name. And eventually she departed in the most incredible, auspicious, very, very, very strongly fixed in Krishna consciousness. But, so I came to know all about this. And, I was happy to hear that she had an auspicious departure, but still this wondering, what was she thinking? What went on? And so many months later, I went from Mayapur to Vrindavan to do my deity work. And Dadu, the elderly gentleman that used to hand out the mail, he saw me and he rushed, oh, I have a letter for you that came a long time ago, but I knew you'd be coming, so I kept it for you. So he gave me this letter. I remember I was standing right in front of the temple, in front of Krishna Balaram. I could see them, and I get this letter. It's like a letter from the grave. It was a letter from Vilasini. I could see her writing. She had a very specific kind of writing. I could see it was shaky, and that it was just prior to her departure. I don't know if it was a few days or a couple of weeks, whatever, but it was close to her departure time. So it was, wow, what is this going to say? And so I read this letter, and it said, I remember the wording, she said, Dear Sitala, all evil went out of me on Lord Nrsingadev's appearance day at sunset. Now I am well. It sounds corny, but it is true. Love, Vilas. So this was, it made my hair stand on end. It was total ecstasy. She wanted me to know it had happened. She had been relieved. And it was a specific moment in time. And I don't know, this is a very, really, really enthuses, very, enlivening to see that success comes. That sometimes anarthas, they feel like this gigantic mountains that are just absolutely impossible to climb over, or that you're climbing through some endless desert, But for Krishna, it's nothing. It is nothing. He just wants to see our sincerity and our dedication. And in one instant, she made it clear. In one instance, it's gone. It's absolutely gone. And I spoke with her husband afterwards, and he said yes. Because it's not that she died at that point. She was still around for some weeks, I don't know, maybe a couple of months. But he said, yeah, she was changed. She just, that aspect of her, it was just gone. People that she couldn't forgive in the past, she suddenly saw, a different angle of vision, why they might have done what they did, why it was fine to forgive them. Something, it just seems impossible. Because it is impossible for us. We are so limited in what we can and can't do. It's up to Krishna. At some point, Krishna lifts the veil and he reveals things to us. And we just have to hold on to that. And when we see it happening, we see it happening in real life, it really builds faith. It really, really builds faith. It's very encouraging. That we just go on with sincerity and dedication, Okay, we're not perfect, we're trying. But, Krishna sees everything. So I was so happy. I was so happy for Vilasini, and so happy to see this character of Krishna, that in one moment, he just can bestow all blessing upon any devotee, as he likes, when he likes, how he likes. Anyway, that is a happy event in '96. Unfortunately, followed by a less happy event later. This was maybe, 98. This is when Harikesh Maharaj resigns. Now, he was having difficulty. He called my husband because they had been friendly in Prabhupada's service, of course, but my husband had also fallen from sannyas, had difficulty, and then he had married. And so he felt that he might be able to help him or discuss with him or something. So he wanted him to come and visit, and so he sent tickets for the family to go. So we went to Germany and spent some time with Harikesh Maharaj, my husband mainly. And, unfortunately, it was inevitable that things were collapsing around him. There was just a combination of things, both psychological, emotional, and medical and financial collapse. And Harikesh Maharaj would also depart from iskcon. And it would have a very, very, very heavy impact on the devotees in his zone, of course, were very dedicated to him. Very, very sad event. And it would also impact heavily on Mayapur, because he was involved very much with Mayapur in the development and funding and sending his disciples, qualified devotees, to help with the project. And so that was a sad event. In that same year, there was a happy event for our family. This is life. A lot of ups and downs, ups and downs, ups and downs. To think, as devotees, like we're not going to be challenged, that's pretty naive. Anyway, on our way to Jaipur, I was going to Jaipur to pick up some deities that had been ordered. And so I think my husband and Rasarani were both there. And as we were approaching Jaipur, I was just thinking, it was just something I was thinking about in my head. I was thinking how my daughter, Rasarani, she had these 3 gorgeous dolls of Krishna, Balaram, and Radharani. And I noticed that she hardly picked up Radharani. And, you know, Krishna and Balaram were well worn from play. And, you know, sometimes I would say, oh, look at Radharani, she's all alone, you know. And Radharani would ignore me. And I was kind of in my mind mentally laughing at myself at how I was trying to shift her affections and to Radharani, and how silly that was of me, you know. And so anyway, after I was thinking like that, and then we went into the Murti shop, and the Murti Wala was finishing his puja. And so we were just looking around the shop at various deities on display. And so when he came out of the puja room, he did something that was quite unusual. I mean, usually he would rush over and greet us, you know. Instead of greeting us, he just stopped and he was watching Radharani, who was examining a small Radharani deity. And he just walked straight over to her, didn't even say hello to us, and he just said, now she was, you know, about 6 years old now. And he says, you know, do you like her? And she said, yes, she's so beautiful. And he said, well, then you should have her. And I was quite surprised. But I said, Pushpendra, you know, you can't give you know, such a young girl, a little girl, a marble deity. And he said, no, no, no. This is between me and my Thakurji. And he explained that today is a special day. And on this day, we're supposed to give, I can't remember the name of it, you know, there's so many Indian holidays. And we're supposed to give a special gift to a special person. But I just didn't know, you know, what I was supposed to give to who. And so I just now, I was praying, please, to my Thakurji, please show me. So as soon as I saw her, I came out and I saw her, I knew I must give her Radharani. And I was like, wow, that is so cool. So now I'm feeling pretty happy. But, you know, I said, you can't just give her Radharani. She has to have Krishna also. And he said, yes, sure. You find a nice Krishna to match her and then you can take. So we looked around, but there wasn't really a nice matching Krishna. So he agreed that he would make a nice one and that I could pick him up the next time I came. So, you know, this is pretty exciting for our family. And so he packed her up and I put her in the back of the taxi, and I didn't mention her again because I didn't really want I didn't really want Radharani to think she was going to start worshiping her. I'm pretty sure that at this point she already had a small Gaura and 2 small Ladu Gopals that were her Krishna Balaram. So, you know, I just didn't, we didn't talk about Radharani for the rest of the trip, you know. And then I figured eventually we'll get Krishna when she's older. But then when we arrived back in Vrindavan, we were at the gate of the MBT, we get out of the taxi and Radharani jumps out. And she said, okay, let's go now to the market. We have to get everything for Radharani. And I was like, oh no. Oh gosh, she's going to want to worship her. And of course, as always, she went out and we wound up taking her out of the box and getting things for her, and we wound up worshiping Srimati Radharani without Krishna for a number of years. As it turned out, it wasn't so easy to get Krishna as we had initially thought. But in the meantime, she put a tiny little statue of Krishna next to Radharani. Radharani was about 12 inches. And so she put this little Krishna next to her. And, you know, when I mentioned that, well, he's kind of small for her, she sort of rolled her eyes, you know, like, what a dumb thing to say. how can I be so mundane? Krishna can be any size he wants, she says. He can be big and he can be small. At Radharani is just a little crown. So again, she wins out. And as embarrassing as it was, since I had been, the minister of deity worship in Europe for some time, so, I know how things are supposed to be done. But, when your child is enlivened to worship the Lord, well, you'll practically do anything to encourage that. So we had Radharani on our altar. People used to say, "Oh, is that Vrinda Devi?" No, it's Radharani. And then another wonderful thing that happened, this is in '99, and my next visit to Vrindavan, it was the month of Purushottam, which is something that we hadn't known about. Never heard of the month of Purushottam. But we noticed that people were doing Dandavat parikramas everywhere. Everywhere you looked, you were seeing people doing Dandavats. So I was talking to my friend Govinda about this, This is kind of cool, that everybody does this. Maybe we should try it, Why don't we go do it around Radha Damodar? We could go there. And so she made some arrangement. We could go there. We went before Mangalarti, and they let us in with our 2 kids. And so we started this amazing experience of doing Dandavat Parikrama. And I have to say, this thing of falling down flat, just falling down flat on the ground. Yeah, we did it straight out, down on the ground, again and again and again. It's just so amazing. It's like you're just dropping your ego over and over, dropping your false identification and just falling and surrendering to Krishna. And, one after another, you just lose all sense of everything else, and you sort of enter this different plane of existence that's really amazing. Anybody that's done it, I know they would have some kind of experience like this. Now, when people started coming for Mangalarti, they were all so charmed to see these, Western ladies doing this. And they were all, "Oh, Radhe, Radhe," and they're like wanting to touch our feet. They were so pleased that we were doing it, and it was very physically challenging. And after 3 times around, this is out the whole courtyard, all the way around, all the samadhis. It was amazing. I thought, I better quit now because I have to do a lot of stuff today other than this. And so the others, they continued around. They did 4 times, I did 3 times. But I felt the effects the next morning in my stomach. I had to roll out of bed. It was so intense. I had so much pain in my stomach. That's where it hit. I don't know why, but whew. But I was so happy that we were able to do it. And it was such a profound experience. So we decided, hey, we did it. We could probably do Radhakund also. It's not that much longer. So we were making a plan to do that. But like the next morning, I was sitting at Srila Prabhupada's Samadhi in front of the temple, and I saw that there were these little kids. Doing Dandavats around Krishna Balaram Mandir. And I was thinking, just see, they're showing us, this is the place of our worship. Srila Prabhupada said everything is here at Krishna Balaram Mandir. So we should do that. We should do it here. So I didn't know it. But meanwhile, Govinda was on the other side of the temple, and she also saw them, these kids, and she started to think the same thing. So when we met together, we understood this is a message from Krishna. So we canceled our Radhakund Parikrama, Dandabat Parikrama, and we agreed to meet at 2 in the morning and do Parikrama around Krishna Balaram Mandir and Srila Prabhupada Samadhi. And that was totally ecstatic. However, when devotees started coming for Mangalarti, they didn't really respond in the same way as the Brijbasis did at Radha Damodar. They're kind of like, what are these crazy ladies doing? What are they doing? Anyway, we hurried up and finished as fast as possible. So anyway, coming to a conclusion, oh, this is way too long, this talk. I should, I don't know. Anyway. But, meanwhile, as things are changing in ISKCON, outside world is also significantly changing. I mean, mainly, I speak of the US, that's what I'm more familiar with, but, consumerism was reaching new peaks. Cocaine crisis is growing, homelessness increasing, as well as more, breakdown of family values. And there became like a big health club craze going on, more and more gyms opening up, aerobics, jogging. Everybody's getting into that then. That was a new thing. And the New Age movement was growing more and more with many varieties and blends of Eastern philosophies, Native American shamanism, and focus on individuality, oneness with nature. And it's said that maybe up to 80% of Americans were affected by or embraced some form of spiritualism. And this drive for self-fulfillment and personal happiness it was really became totally mainstream around this time. Thousands of New Age bookstores were opening up, millions of New Age books coming out, Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, Louise Hayes, everybody appearing on Oprah. And there's just a lot of focus now on the mind-body connection and the power of thought. It even started to transform the workplace. There was a new phenomena of corporate spiritualism was introduced as a means to motivate employees, and millions of dollars was spent on promoting this. I don't know, was this possibly a result of the holy names flooding the world in some ways? Some of us think so. Srila Prabhupada seemed to indicate it. It's interesting to examine how the world has changed since the Sankirtan movement spread to Western countries. Because Srila Prabhupada said, by Sankirtan, the mantra is creating an auspicious atmosphere all over the world, which is creating more religious sentiments directly and indirectly worldwide. One devotee asked, what does that mean? And Prabhupada said, the performance of mass Sankirtan and book distribution is releasing the spiritual potency of the Lord in the atmosphere of this earth. The Sankirtan Yajna has come directly from the spiritual world. And it's not a material movement. It's not like any political ideology or ism. So we can see these changes in this way. Of course, it was also a big deal happening around this time was Harry Potter and its phenomenal success, which amazed the world. I think it was probably the first time in 40 years or something, 30 years that I read non-devotee books. We just didn't do it. We didn't do it. Most of us anyway. And, you know, they were great, well written, good messages, magical worlds. And, you know, in the music scene out, this is sort of a beginning in this decade, hip hop, rap, grunge, Madonna, Michael Jackson, still going strong. And our very own Raghunath Kapo, as a devotee who started Youth of Today and Shelter, you know, which was a punk rock band with spiritual messages that became pretty popular in America. He now has a book called Punk to Monk. Didn't read it yet, but I am sure it's good. And international travel was becoming much more common, although there were no low-cost airlines yet, and you definitely had to use a travel agent if you wanted to go anywhere. And then there was a growth of kind of one-stop, cheap, convenient shopping with Walmart and Kmart. And, you know, although it seems so convenient and cheap, you know, I saw when I visited my family, I saw the effects of what this did. You know, when I went, the devastation of a lovely little town, the end of small family-owned shop on the main street. They just couldn't compete, you know, that's how it used to be. People had their little shops on the main street. And, you know, it was kind of friendly and personal, very disheartening. And there was a huge, my mom told me there was this huge increase in suicide, alcoholism, just shot through the roof, you know, because nobody had anything that, you know, that they could control and take pride in. So although these things, maybe they seem nice, but really had bad effect. So many other things happening in this generation. They call it Generation X. Those are the kids that are born between 1965 and 1980. Then they're coming of age in the 90s. You know, they're the first generation to use personal computers. And unlike the baby boomers who tended to grow up in comfortable circumstances, they had a lot more obstacles to overcome. So things were different for them. You know, definitely a lot of difference. In the 90s, 2/3 of married women with children worked. And there was like a massive, the increased costs of homes and college educations, it demanded 2 incomes. You had to have it. It wasn't like a choice. It's like you can't survive without it. In fact, you know, college tuition was rising like 3 times faster than the household's incomes. It's just terrible what was done to young people, putting them in debt. I mean, this goes on. Right from school, coming out with huge debt, you know. And on average, you know, married women in the 90s, they provided more than, how much? Over 40% of a family's income. So these are big changes in society. The whole culture was changing inside iskcon and outside iskcon. So that's one thing for certain. There's always going to be change. And we will always have to adjust to it. So this has gone on way too long, and I will end now. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for listening. Hare Krishna.